Welcome back, everybody. Now, in the previous lecture, we spoke about some common misconceptions about IELTS, and one of those was that the introduction is the most important paragraph. This is a myth. It's not the most important paragraph. The body is more important. However, that does not mean that the introduction is not important. The introduction is still very important. And in this lecture, we are going to learn how to write very quick, but also very high quality introductions so that we save plenty of time for the body of the essay without compromising quality. Now, let's begin by looking at a typical question in task 2. Some people think that climate change is happening because of the way humans live their lives. Others think that these changes are natural and that human activity does not have an influence. Discuss both views and give your own opinion. Quick check. What would we do in this situation? Well, first of all, we would plan. And hopefully you remember the 3-part process to planning. First of all, identify the question type. Here we have a discussion opinion question. Secondly, we highlight the keywords. I would trust you to highlight the keywords here, and then we would write a plan for the body paragraphs. No need to plan the introduction because after this lecture we will know exactly how to write that introduction. Now here is a model introduction. There is no doubt that the Earth's climate is changing. While some people believe that these changes are due to human activity, others argue that they are the result of natural processes. In this essay, I will discuss both sides of the argument and explain my support for the latter view. So, what we have here is a 3-sentence introduction where each sentence has a specific purpose, but which sentence matches up with which purpose. You can pause the video here while you work out which number matches up with which letter. Okay, let's check the answers. There is no doubt that the Earth's climate is changing. This is a general statement about the topic. Some people struggle with thinking about how to word a general statement. A good idea is to ask yourself a question. What is undeniably true? What would both sides agree with? There are other questions that you can ask yourself to help give you an idea about how to write your general statement, but we will look at these at the end of this lecture. Let's have a look at the second sentence. While some people believe that these changes are due to human activity, others argue that they are the result of natural processes. What we're doing here is paraphrasing the statement in the question. Paraphrasing can be quite tricky. We go into more detail about how to paraphrase in the lexical resource section of this course. But for now, all we're going to look at are some templates, and we'll put these at the end of this lecture. Some templates for the paraphrase sentence. Finally, we have, in this essay, I will discuss both sides of the argument and explain my support for the latter view. Remember, the latter view is the second argument in the previous sentence. The former view is the first argument in the previous sentence. And what we're doing here is telling the reader our plan and giving the reader our opinion. Now, why is give the reader your opinion in brackets? For those of you who were paying close attention in the previous lecture on common myths, you will remember that we do not always give our opinion in the introduction. That does not apply to discussion essays. In discussion essays, we do not give an opinion, but we may want to give a plan. If you are somebody that struggles with time, an introduction this long may be quite intimidating, but we can make the introduction shorter. The current introduction is 51 words. We can reduce that by removing the plan sentence. The plan sentence is optional, but not strictly necessary. We do, however, need to keep the opinion if we are in an opinion or opinion discussion essay. So notice the subtle changes that I'm about to make to this introduction. We only really needed to change a couple of words, but we've completely removed the plan sentence while keeping the opinion. All we've done is we've changed others argue to I would argue. We've kept the opinion, we've kept both arguments, we've just removed the plan, which is not strictly necessary for task achievement, and we've reduced the word count in effect to 33 words, giving us a lot more time to focus on the body, the conclusion, and checking our work. So here are some useful expressions for introductions. Firstly, the general statement sentence. As we looked at, we have there is no doubt that, it is clear that. What would both sides agree with? Nowadays or these days, very common introduction. Remember to use these time references with the present simple or the present continuous, depending on the context. But contrast that with in recent years, or over the last few years, these expressions need the present perfect. It is important to consider, followed by a question word like how or whether or why or when or who. This is useful when you ask yourself the question, why is this question important? Maybe it's about government investment in the arts. So you can ask the question, it is important to consider how the government should spend its money. While some people think this, others argue this. Now that comes to the paraphrase sentence. And you can see this here. While some people believe this, others argue that this. You just fill in the gaps there with what the topic is about. There are many people who think. That might be quite useful for an opinion essay where you're not given two sides. While there are many benefits to whatever we're talking about, there are also some drawbacks to consider. This could be useful for discussion essays. And finally, the opinion and plan sentence. I completely agree or disagree with this statement. Band 7 requirements state that you must present a clear position throughout the response. So the opinion must be clear from the very beginning of your essay. It must be very clear from the introduction. Even if you don't fully agree with a statement, you can say, I tend to agree, or I partly agree or disagree with the former or latter argument, as long as your opinion is clear. And in this essay, I will support my view with examples. That's where the plan comes in. This essay will, or in this essay I will. And you can see this here as well. In this essay, I will discuss both sides of the argument or topic. This is probably more for a discussion essay where we don't want to give our opinion. Finally, in this essay, I will explore or discuss some of the problems associated with the topic and propose or suggest some solutions. So this final template is very useful when talking about problem and solution essays or situation essays, as we looked at earlier in the course. Now remember that this final sentence is optional. You can put the opinion in the paraphrase sentence and drop the plan completely to give yourself more time. Try it with both and see what works best for you. So, a quick recap. The formula for introductions is A. Give a general statement about the topic. B. Paraphrase the language in the task and maybe write an opinion if you don't choose to use the third sentence. But if you do choose to use the third sentence, it's C. Give an opinion and state your plan. Now I want you to try practicing this yourself and see how you get along with writing an introduction with this formula. See if it helps to speed up your writing a little bit. Use the templates to help you, because the whole idea here is to speed up your introduction so that we have more time for the body of the essay, because that's much more important, and that's what we're going to look at in our next lecture. See you there. Welcome back everybody. In today's lecture, we're going to look for the first time at what I keep referring to as the most important part of the Task 2 essay, and that is the body of the essay. So by the end of this lecture, you should have a good understanding of how a quality body paragraph is structured and how it is developed, and you should be able to use this knowledge to go away and create similar paragraphs yourselves. So let's begin by talking about why the body paragraphs are so important. The body of the essay is where you demonstrate your ability to engage with a task appropriately, construct an argument or develop a discussion, use a range of vocabulary related to a specific topic, and use a range of grammar for specific purposes, and link ideas, explanations, and examples cohesively. So really, the body is the place where you are addressing every one of the band descriptors, all four, or in other words, 100% of your score. So we are looking at task response, constructing an argument, lexical resource, a range of vocabulary, grammatical range and accuracy, a range of grammar, and coherence and cohesion, linking ideas and explanations cohesively. Or in other words, we are looking at all of the band descriptor categories within the body. That's why it's so important, and that's why, whereas we only spend 5 minutes on the introduction and 5 minutes on the conclusion, we dedicate 10 minutes each to the body paragraphs, 20 minutes altogether. Now that we know why the body paragraphs are so important, we can look into how to construct very high quality paragraphs so that we can go much further to achieving band 7 or above in the exam. So now let's look at what a high quality body paragraph looks like. On the right hand side of this slide, you can see a model body paragraph for a problem and solution essay. The reason that this body paragraph works so well is that each sentence has a clear purpose. And you can see these different purposes on the left hand side here. So the first sentence is called a topic sentence, which we denote with the letter T. One problem in big cities is the lack of green spaces. This tells the reader what the main idea is in this paragraph, what the main topic is. Everything that follows this sentence can be related back to the original idea. Now in this paragraph, we are following the topic sentence with an example. For example, in the city where I live, we only have one small park, which is itself surrounded by concrete buildings. The example is used here to support the idea that there is a lack of green spaces in big cities. Everything must be related. We follow that up with a supporting sentence where we're asking how or why. This is an issue because, so why is it an issue? This is an issue because city citizens need green areas in order to relax, and the plants and trees also help to filter the air. Now because this is a problem and solution essay, this is followed by a solution sentence. To solve this problem, city authorities must invest more in building parks and gardens. Then finally, we look at a result sentence, which we denote with the letter R. As a result, the people who live in cities will suffer from less stress and breathe cleaner and safer air. So everything in this paragraph has a purpose. And notice how every sentence here logically links onto the next sentence and also logically links back to its preceding sentence. Now this is quite a lot to take in, so what we're going to do is look at 2 more model paragraphs looking at different question types. So here we have a body paragraph for a discussion essay where we're not giving any opinions, but we just want to point out what the advantages are of a particular topic, in this case travelling by aeroplane. Notice that the structure of the body paragraph here is slightly different to the previous paragraph. This is an important point to make. Your body paragraphs do not need to follow all the same structures. In fact, you should try to mix it up so that you don't sound too repetitive in your structure. Variety is essential. So rather than T, E, S, Sol, R, as we looked at in the previous paragraph, this paragraph follows a different structure, which we'll look at now. So first of all, you have a very clear topic sentence. One of the most significant benefits of air travel is speed. We're covering both the task language, air travel, traveling by aeroplane, and giving a very clear idea about what the argument here is, speed. We follow that up in this paragraph with a supporting sentence. So saying why, or how, or just giving a little bit more information about the main idea. Most aircraft nowadays are able to travel faster than any other mode of transport, and they do not have to deal with the same obstacles as on land. How can we further support this idea? Well, we can use an example. To illustrate this speed, a journey from London to New York by air takes just 10 hours. Now here we come to the letter A, which represents an alternative or an alternative situation, where we look at an alternative to further support the strength of our argument. In this case, in contrast, travelling across the Atlantic by sea takes several days. An extra supporting sentence at the end, evidently, travelling by plane is far more convenient than travelling by any other means. Let's look at another example. So, here we are looking at the other body paragraph in this discussion essay, where we're looking at the drawbacks. So try experimenting with lots of different combinations, but remember to always put the topic sentence first. In this case, we've gone topic sentence, support, example, second topic, second example. However, air travel does have a drawback in air pollution. The power required for a plane to take off and fly to its destination causes a huge amount of fuel to be burnt. It is believed that 13 million flights are taken each year, and this creates a huge strain on the environment. Furthermore, aeroplanes require airports, and airports often cause a lot of stress for locals. For example, the sound pollution airports leak can prevent local families from sleeping properly. So what we've done in this case is looked at an extra argument and supported it with an extra example. So let's finish up with some general tips for body paragraphs. So first of all, make sure all body paragraphs begin with a topic sentence. How you choose to follow that topic sentence is up to you. There's no strict rules. Just make sure that it follows in a clear and logical progression, whether you use support sentences or example sentences or alternative solution sentences or result sentences. Topic sentences should be relevant to both the task itself and the paragraph idea. There should be two halves to a topic sentence. One of the main disadvantages of travelling abroad, that relates back to the task, is that it can cause homesickness. That is related to the paragraph. Your topic sentence should contain two halves. Keep paragraphs 4 to 5 sentences long. Any more than 5 sentences can seem a little bit drawn out, can also waste your time, remembering that time is very important in the exam, while anything less than 4 sentences may seem underdeveloped unless your sentences are very complex and are filled with many clauses. In discussion and opinion essays, remember to begin your body with the side that you disagree with. This is much more logical as it allows us to refute that previous argument and leads much more naturally onto the conclusion. For problem and solution essays, remember to use the same body paragraph formula twice. 3 sentences about the problem, then 2 sentences about the solution. Keep paragraphs based on one central topic. Try not to think about too many different ideas, as this can run the risk of diverging from the Band 7 requirement for one central topic per paragraph in Coherence and Cohesion. So now you know how to construct a high quality body paragraph. I want you to go away and try creating one of these yourself, looking at a new IELTS writing question, see how the formula works for you, see how the planning process now works for you, and see if it gives you a bit more confidence in your writing. And I will see you in the next lecture where we're going to look at the end of the essay, which is the conclusion. Welcome back to the course, everybody. Now, in today's lecture, we're going to talk about a paragraph where many students do make a few mistakes. Having marked and corrected hundreds of essays myself, I have noticed a pattern wherein students, having worked so hard at the introduction and the body, they've usually run out of time by the time they get to the conclusion, and the conclusion comes across as a little bit rushed. So in today's lecture, we're going to learn how to write conclusions quickly, but also accurately, so that you can finish in style and leave the examiner with a very strong impression. So let's start by having a look at an example conclusion. Now, we have an exercise here, very short one. I just want you to read this conclusion to a task 2 writing question and match each sentence 1 to 2 to its purpose A to B. So, in conclusion, although renting can be useful for people who need a home on a short-term basis, this convenience comes at a high cost. In my opinion, the benefits of renting are outweighed by the drawbacks, and I would prefer to buy a property rather than to rent one. So we've got two purposes here, and can you match them up? Either we're summarising the key points or we're giving our opinion. Not too difficult on this one. A matches up to 1, summarising the key points, while B matches up to 2, giving your own opinion. It's a little bit more logical to structure the conclusion this way, as it makes sense to leave the reader with a clear understanding of what your viewpoint is. Remember, this is only for discussion opinion essays or opinion essays. This one here looks like a discussion opinion essay because we have looked at the drawbacks. Now, there are some very important words and phrases in this conclusion which we're going to focus on in a moment. In conclusion, very clear introduction to the type of paragraph that we're writing. Although, which allows us to introduce a sense of contrast and complexity to the sentence. And in my opinion, where we're giving some language which makes it very clear what we're doing in this sentence. Now, there are other ways we can use each of these categories, and you can see these here. Introducing a conclusion, very simple, in conclusion, or to sum up, or having looked at both sides. Now, expressing an opinion, in my opinion, personally, in my view. I'm sure you can think of more. My view is that, it is my belief that, things like that. And then these linking devices, very important, particularly when we're looking at discussion essays or discussion opinion essays. Although, while, whereas, despite, or in spite of. Be careful with despite or in spite of, as these will need to be followed by a noun or a gerund, which is a verb in a noun form. We'll have a look at a couple more examples to help us here. So you can see how we've used the language on the previous slide to create a very coherent and cohesive and accurate conclusion here. To sum up, while there are disadvantages to handwriting, such as compromised readability and a greater time commitment, these must be weighed against the cultural and practical benefits that handwriting offers. Personally, I feel that these benefits outweigh the drawbacks. Another conclusion. In conclusion, despite the convenience and lower cost homeschooling offers, we must take into consideration the dangers of fewer social opportunities and real-world experience. In my view, these drawbacks outweigh the disadvantages, and I would not want to homeschool my children. There is something very important to take into consideration here as well, and that is that we are not just saying that there are pros and cons. We are not just saying, yep, so in conclusion, there are some advantages and disadvantages. Personally, I think the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. We're not saying that. All that would do is rephrase your introduction. Instead, we are actually summarizing our ideas and our arguments and our content. So in the first conclusion, you can see how we've summarized our body paragraph ideas by writing phrases like compromised readability, greater time commitment, cultural and practical benefits. And in the second conclusion, you can see convenience and lower cost, dangers of fewer social opportunities and real-world experience. So a very clear summary of the ideas put forward in the body of the essay. Let's move on to look at a problem and solution conclusion, because this is a little bit different to the other structures. Problem and solution essays, which most situation essays fall into, are slightly different in that you are not being asked for a specific opinion. So in this conclusion, after summarizing the content of your essay, summarizing what the problems are, you should state who you think the responsibility for solving these problems lies with. So let's have a look at an example. In conclusion, although modern cities face a variety of problems, such as crime and air pollution, these problems are not insurmountable. As you can see in the bottom corner there, insurmountable just means impossible to overcome, impossible to tackle. In my view, it is the government's responsibility to tackle these issues, and they should begin by considering some of the solutions proposed above. Again, it's a nice rhythm to the conclusion here, nice and fluent and coherent, and we haven't just said there are problems. We've actually said what they are: crime and air pollution. Okay, and we've made a very clear statement as to who we think should tackle the issues: the government. So we summarize the key points, and then we state who the responsibility lies with for problem and solution essays. Again, just to point out a few pieces of useful vocabulary, some nice expressions. Face a variety of problems. Face collocates very strongly with problems, and these problems are not insurmountable. Again, as mentioned earlier, insurmountable, impossible to overcome. Finally, it is the government's responsibility to tackle these issues, and they should begin by considering some of the solutions proposed above. You could use this entire template and just remove the word government and put in whoever you think should solve the problem. Parents, teachers, school authorities, environmental agencies, whoever you think is responsible. Now, if you're out of time, and this is a very common occurrence because of the amount of time some people spend on the introduction of the body, they haven't really been paying attention to the time, then you may struggle to write 2 sentences. And if that's the case, you can just write 1 sentence. And there is an advantage to writing 1 sentence as well. It improves the complexity of your sentence, and of course it saves you time, because it's extremely important that you have at least a couple of minutes to go back and check your essay. As we looked at in the timing lecture, ideally 5 minutes, but at least a couple of minutes. What we need to do is simply combine the summary of the key points sentence with our opinion sentence to create 1 sentence. Here's an example. In conclusion, despite the culture shock and potential high cost of moving abroad, I believe that the prospect of broadening one's horizons is a positive which outweighs any and all negatives. Again, we are not just saying pros and cons. We've got what they are: culture shock, high cost, versus broadening one's horizons. But in this case, what we've done is that we've inserted I believe that into the place after the comma, so that we are able to give an opinion while at the same time contrasting the pros and cons and covering all the task requirements. So it's as simple as that. So you just use your contrasting word, such as despite, or whereas, or while, or although, after in conclusion. You then follow the contrasting word with one side of the argument or one side of the discussion, remembering to paraphrase the content of your essay. You follow that with I believe that, or my view is that, or personally I feel, any of that opinion language, and then you follow it up with a summarization of the content of the side that you agree with. Okay, so practice this a few times. It can take a bit of work before you become confident in it and before your speed improves that much. So do take a few opportunities to practice a conclusion which only has 1 sentence. Just for those that aren't quite sure, broadening one's horizons Just means expanding one's range of knowledge, interests and experiences. Quite useful when we're talking about travel. So, to sum up, in conclusion, do not simply state that the topic has benefits and drawbacks, or that each viewpoint has pros and cons. This does nothing to summarize the main ideas, which is the purpose of a conclusion, but only rephrases your introduction. If you struggle to paraphrase, then you may want to skip forward for a moment to the synonyms and paraphrasing lecture, which is in the lexical resource section of the course. We will get there eventually. And that brings me to my next point. Do try to paraphrase the content of your essay. If you write greater affordability as an advantage in your body, try something like less expensive in your conclusion. Again, paraphrasing, lexical resource section, we will come to this. Finally, do not add any unnecessary information in your conclusion. This is a waste of time, and you should try to save as much time as possible to check for errors in your work. That's much more likely to improve your score than adding unnecessary information. So there we go, conclusions. We've now reached the end of the essay, so we can talk about how to improve the essay as a whole in the remainder of this course. Hi everybody, welcome back to the course. Today we're going to look at a new section, and that's section 3, which is all about structuring the essay. In band descriptor terms, this is all about coherence and cohesion. And we're going to begin by looking at cohesive devices and referencing, or how to achieve flow in your writing. Let's begin by asking the question, what are cohesive devices? In the band descriptors, they obviously point them out. They say for band 7 that you need to use accurate and appropriate cohesive devices with not too much overuse or underuse. But what good is that if we don't know what cohesive devices are? So, cohesive devices are the words and phrases which link your sentences and the clauses within your sentences together. They link the ideas between separate sentences and clause together. So really, cohesive devices create flow. I want you to read an extract now from a Model Task 2 essay and mark what you think the cohesive devices are. Identify the cohesive devices I've used in this paragraph. One of the main drawbacks of driving a car is the amount of pollution it causes. This is because the fumes from car exhaust contain chemicals which pollute the atmosphere. As a result, people who live in places with many cars, like cities, may suffer from respiratory-related illnesses. Furthermore, air pollution has a negative impact on a global scale. To illustrate, the polar ice caps are melting as a consequence of global warming, to which air pollution contributes. So, in this paragraph, what are the cohesive devices I've used? This is because. As a result. Furthermore. To illustrate. And as a consequence of. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cohesive devices being used in this paragraph. And you can see how they all link back to the previous sentences before them. So we're linking ideas here. This really gets to the oils the wheels of the paragraph. It just increases that flow in a dramatic way. And so what I've got on this slide is a table full of cohesive devices that you can use in your own essays. We're going to use these cohesive devices, the purposes, such as begin an opinion, describe a result, give a reason, give an example. You're going to use these more than once. So it's important that we have a variety of different cohesive devices so that you don't repeat yourself. It's a very bad idea to write, for example, twice in one paragraph. It's a bad idea to write, for example, twice in one essay. You won't need to. You have a number of different ones here. For example, to illustrate, for instance, to illustrate this point. Okay? So you should never have to repeat a cohesive device. It would be a good idea here to pause the video and to take a screenshot of this table, or perhaps even write it down to help you memorize the devices themselves. And on this next slide, we have even more useful cohesive devices for different purposes. Here we've got clarifying a point, linking ideas, switching arguments, and making another point. Okay, so lots of different cohesive devices that you can use to improve that flow in your essay. Again, pause the video, take a screenshot, print it out, and try experimenting with these cohesive devices to see if you can improve that flow in your essay. Perhaps you've been struggling to achieve flow in your essay. This is how you would remedy that. So let's look at cohesive devices in use. Now, using the cohesive devices we've looked at on the past 2 slides in the table, I want you to try yourself to change this paragraph to make it sound more coherent, more cohesive, and more fluent. A disadvantage of prisons is their arguably luxurious conditions. Inmates are given televisions to watch, video games to play, and expensive sports facilities to use. This does nothing to deter the criminals from committing crimes once they are released. This pleasant environment requires a great amount of money to be maintained. The taxpayer, whose taxes pay for the upkeep of these prisons, is left out of pocket in order to keep prisoners entertained in their cells. Just as a side note, a little bit of extra vocabulary for you here. To be out of pocket means to have lost money. So that might be something you can include, especially if you're doing the general training module, as it's a quite idiomatic language. So what I want you to do then is to see if you can use the cohesive devices we've looked at on the past 2 slides to modify this paragraph to make it more fluent, to make it more cohesive. You can remove words and add words, expressions, phrases, but what we're trying to do here is just improve the coherence and cohesion of the paragraph itself. Okay, so pause the video now and see if you can have a go at this exercise. Okay, if you're ready, let's have a look at how I've modified this paragraph. Okay, so firstly, one disadvantage of prisons is their arguably luxurious conditions. For example, inmates are given televisions to watch, video games to play, and expensive sports facilities to use. This is a problem because it does nothing to deter the criminals from committing crimes once they are released. Moreover, this pleasant environment requires a great amount of money to be maintained. As a consequence, the taxpayer, whose taxes pay for the upkeep of these prisons, is left out of pocket in order to keep prisoners entertained in their cells. As you can see, every cohesive device that's been used here has a purpose. It either introduces a point, it introduces an example, it explains a reason for your previous idea, introduces another point, it introduces a result of the previous idea. They're all referring back to previous sentences, okay, previous ideas. And that really creates a well-developed argument that is also very fluent and cohesive. One side point to make here is you should not overuse cohesive devices. This paragraph works because every cohesive device serves a purpose and improves the paragraph as a result. But if you're using cohesive devices all over the place, that will really look very forced, and it in fact has the opposite of effect of reducing the fluency of the paragraph, reducing the flow, because it looks it's hard to read when it's like that. So make sure you're only using about 4 or 5 cohesive devices per paragraph. Okay, now let's have a look at referencing, which is very similar to cohesive devices, but less so with the vocabulary and the expressions, and it's usually single words. We'll have a look at what it means now. And we'll have a look at what it means by comparing 2 paragraphs. So I want you to look at these 2 paragraphs and decide which one looks more fluent. One reason sports stars deserve high salaries is that the sports stars set good examples for children. It is because they show children that if the children believe in themselves, the children can achieve anything. If top athletes didn't do it, then the children would lose out on a role model. It is why successful sports professionals should earn more money than other professionals. So what do you think? Does this sound fluent? Let's look at the next one. One reason sports stars deserve high salaries is that they set good examples for children. This is because they show children that, if they believe in themselves, they can achieve anything. If top athletes didn't encourage this idea, then these children would lose out on a role model. This is why successful sports professionals should earn more money than other professionals. So which one? The first paragraph or the second paragraph? Which one looks more fluent? Which one looks more cohesive? Hopefully, you've all picked the second paragraph. Let's look at why this is. So, as you can see here, we added some words and we took away other words. Let's look at the words in bold. So one reason sports stars deserve high salaries is that they set good examples for children. So we've removed the second sports stars and just added the pronoun they. This reduces repetition and increases the flow. This is because they show children. So this is because the this refers to the previous idea about setting good examples. How do they set good examples? Well, this is how. This is because, okay? Instead of it, this is referencing back. It's often much better to use a this than an its pronoun. If they believe in themselves, they can achieve anything. Again, we're reducing the repetition. We're not repeating children, but instead we use they. If top athletes didn't encourage this idea, here we've kind of had to modify the entire section. Instead of didn't do it, we've had didn't encourage this idea. But it's necessary because encourage, first of all, is more accurate. It's a better collocation with idea. But the important thing here is looking at the this instead of the it. So this idea, the previous idea that we've just spoken about, we're referencing back again. Then these children which we've spoken about, again referencing, would lose out on a role model. This is why instead of it is why. I'm not going to keep repeating myself. You can see how it works. This is why successful sports professionals should earn more money than other professionals. So now you know a bit more about cohesive devices and referencing. Try experimenting with them. Try seeing if you can use a few more in your essays. If you're struggling with flow, then this is probably the fastest way to remedy that problem.